everywhere, right? It's one of the most famous images on the entire planet, a symbol of rebellion slapped on millions of t-shirts. But who was the man, Che Guevara? Was he the idealistic doctor who just wanted to heal the poor? Or was he a ruthless executioner who built concentration camps? Today, we're going to try to unravel that myth and find the real man. You can kill me, but how will you kill my ideas? I mean, those were supposedly his last words, defiant to the very end. And you know what? He was right. His image and his ideas, they absolutely lived on. But to really get what was behind those ideas, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. So how does a bookish medical student named Ernesto Guevara become Che, this global icon of rebellion? Well, his journey is filled with these incredible contradictions that are honestly way more interesting than the simple myth we all know. You know, he wasn't born a hardened guerrilla fighter, not at all. He started his life as Ernesto, a young asthmatic kid from a pretty well-off family in Argentina. A revolutionary was probably the last thing anyone, including him, thought he would ever become. Even when he was young, you could kind of see these two sides of him at war. He had this incredible intellect, just devouring thousands of books on everything from poetry to the political theories of Marx and Lenin. But at the same time, even with his chronic asthma, he pushed his body to the absolute limit playing sports. It was this mix of deep thinking and intense willpower, just kind of simmering below the surface, waiting for a spark. And that spark? It was this insane 8,000-mile motorcycle trip across South America. What started out as this big youthful adventure, well, it turned into something else entirely. He saw a continent that was just in pain, the brutal way miners were exploited, the deep poverty of rural communities, and the quiet dignity of leprosy patients whose society had just cast aside. That journey didn't just show him the world, it completely changed how he saw it. And the change was just profound. See, Ernesto, the doctor, he left wanting to treat sick people one by one. But the man who came back, the one who would soon be known as Che, he saw the entire system as the disease, and he came to a pretty stark conclusion. The only cure wasn't medicine. It was violent, armed revolution. So with this new fire in him, his path eventually led him to Mexico City. And it's there that he met two brothers who would change his life, and really the course of history, Fidel and Raul Castro. He immediately signed on to their mission to overthrow the US-backed dictator who was running Cuba. Che proved himself right away. He became a key commander, training their small rebel force in guerrilla tactics. But their first shot at invading Cuba, oh, it was a total disaster, an absolute catastrophe. They were ambushed by the dictator's army, and their force of 82 was just decimated. Only about a dozen survivors, including Che and the Castros, managed to escape into the mountains. The revolution was pretty much dead before it even started. But here's the crazy part. It's in this moment of total failure that the legend of Che really starts to build. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a nation builder in the middle of the mountains. He set up health clinics, schools for people who couldn't read, even small factories. He won the trust and the loyalty of the local peasants, and they became the backbone of their new revolutionary army. So after 2 long years of fighting from the mountains, they finally marched into Havana as victors in 1959. Suddenly, Che was arguably the second most powerful man in Cuba. And this is where things get complicated, because now he has real power, and that idealistic doctor and that ruthless revolutionary inside him, they're about to collide hard. I mean, Fidel Castro gave him the keys to the kingdom. He put him in charge of basically everything, the national bank, industry, and the military. Che was essentially the architect of the new Cuba, tasked with building its entire economy and shaping its ideology from the ground up. And on one hand, some of what he did was incredible. He led this massive nationwide literacy campaign, sending an army of students and volunteers into the countryside to teach people how to read. And in just 1 year, Cuba's literacy rate jumped from around 60% to an unbelievable 96%. It was a huge success. But, and this is a huge but, there was an incredibly dark side to his power. As the commander of the notorious La Cabaña prison, Che became the state's chief enforcer. He oversaw these tribunals that sent hundreds of people, former officials, political prisoners, suspected traitors, to the firing squad. For Che, revolutionary justice had to be swift, and it had to be final. So you have to ask, why? What was driving him to be so brutal? Well, Che had this obsession, this really radical, utopian idea of creating a new man. He truly believed that for communism to work, you had to completely remake human nature itself. Society had to be cleansed of selfishness and individualism, and people had to be motivated by moral duty alone, not money. And the way he tried to forge this new man, well, it was ruthless. He established Cuba's very first labor camps, and he sent anyone who didn't fit his perfect ideological mold, political dissenters, priests, anyone he considered antisocial, for so-called re-education. The whole point was to break their spirit and remold them into his vision of a perfect citizen. But here's the thing about Che. Even with all this power in Cuba, he just couldn't sit still. For him, the Cuban Revolution was never the endgame. It was just the first domino. His real dream was to set the whole world on fire, to start a global war against imperialism. He tries to export his revolution, first to the Congo in Africa, and it's a total disaster, a complete failure. But that doesn't stop him. He goes underground and then secretly reemerges in Bolivia to try and start another guerrilla war. But this time it was different. He was completely isolated, the local peasants didn't join him, and the Bolivian army, backed by the US CIA, hunted his small group without mercy. Eventually, an informant gave up his location. They found him. He was wounded, captured, the fight was over. On October 9, 1967, a young Bolivian soldier was given the order to execute him. And according to the people who were there, Che, defiant as ever, looked at him and said, "Shoot, coward, you are only going to kill a man." And those words, they would help build his myth long after he was gone. So here we are, all these years later, still asking the same questions. Was he a hero, a monster, or something way more complicated? The debate is just as fierce today as it ever was. Because you really can't square his legacy, it's just split right down the middle. For millions of people, he is a martyr, a symbol of the fight for social justice, but for millions of others, he was a cold-blooded killer, a fanatic who built concentration camps and murdered his opponents. And maybe that's why the t-shirt, the image, is so much more popular than the man. But the man, the symbol is simple, right? It just means rebellion. He was a healer who killed, a liberator who built prisons, an intellectual who demanded that everyone think exactly like him. That complex truth is so much more challenging and so much more human than the face on the t-shirt will ever be.